Chapter 1. The Letter with No Name. It was a blustery Thursday morning in Finchley Dell, the sort of small English village where secrets brewed quietly behind well-trimmed hedges and lace-curtained windows. Jessica Fletcher had arrived only 2 days earlier, seeking peace and solitude to finish the final chapters of her next novel. She'd been invited by her old friend Daphne Worthington, a retired literature professor with a love for long walks, marmalade toast, and passionate debates about Shakespeare. Jessica had just finished her breakfast, a slice of treacle tart and a strong cup of tea, when Daphne re-entered the dining room holding an envelope. "This came through the door just now," Daphne said, her brow furrowed. "No name, no stamp, just this." Jessica took the envelope, which was made of fine cream paper, the kind one might use for invitations or apologies. The handwriting was neat, but oddly impersonal. She opened it carefully. What was once buried must remain so, lest the past destroy the present. There was no signature, no address, no explanation. Jessica looked up, curiosity already blooming. "Did anyone see who delivered this?" Daphne shook her head. "No one. I was watering the lavender in the front garden. The gate didn't even creak." Moments later, the calm was broken by a knock on the front door. Daphne opened it to reveal Reverend Phelps, the village vicar, looking rather pale beneath his cassock. "Daphne," he said gravely, nodding at Jessica. "Miss Fletcher, I'm afraid there's been some distressing news. It's about Gregory Sims. You knew him, didn't you?" Jessica tilted her head. "The historian? We were introduced yesterday at the church fete. Seemed rather intense. He was found this morning," the Reverend said slowly. "In his study, dead. Heart attack, it seems." Daphne gasped. "But he was only 50, fit as a fox." "Exactly," the Reverend replied. "He was working on that local history of Finchley Dell, prying into the village's past. Some say he'd uncovered something. Best left forgotten." Jessica glanced again at the anonymous letter still resting on the breakfast tray. The village was abuzz by midday. Jessica, never one to let a coincidence pass quietly, took a walk into the village centre. The postmistress, Mrs. Featherstone, was already speculating about curses and family feuds. The baker, a stout fellow named Colin Briggs, swore he saw a light on in Gregory Sims's study well past midnight, and a young woman in a green scarf, whom Jessica didn't yet know, was overheard saying that Sims had been digging too deep. Jessica stopped at the churchyard to gather her thoughts. The wind whispered through the yew trees, and she noticed a second figure standing by the Sims family grave, Detective Inspector Marcus Langley, tall, composed, and far too serious for someone wearing polka-dot socks. "Inspector," she said pleasantly. "I assume you've heard?" "I have," he replied with a curt nod. "Curious timing, wouldn't you say?" He was due to present his latest findings this weekend. Rumours about an old scandal in the Worthington family. Even Daphne might be connected. Jessica's eyebrows lifted, but she said nothing. Langley narrowed his eyes. "And you, Miss Fletcher, what brings you to Finchley Dell precisely now?" She smiled. "Holiday. Writing. Murder does seem to follow me, I admit, but I promise I had nothing to do with this one." "Yet," he muttered, only half in jest. That evening, Jessica stood by the study window, looking out over the darkened garden. The village had settled into a low hush, but her mind raced. She retrieved the anonymous letter again and studied it closely. There was a faint smudge at the bottom right. Dirt, perhaps? Potting soil? Something nagged at her like a misplaced comma in a sentence. Then she remembered. At the church fete, Sims had spoken animatedly about an unpublished diary from the 1800s, a diary that supposedly revealed the true cause of Lord Worthington's suicide. Sims had said he'd found it tucked away in the rectory archives behind a broken panel in the vestry. Jessica turned sharply. What if this wasn't a heart attack? She wrote the thought in her notebook, followed by 3 names: Daphne Worthington, Inspector; Langley; the woman in the green scarf below it. She added, what was once buried. She had a feeling this mystery was only just beginning. Chapter 2. The Girl at the Garden Gate. The morning air was damp and heavy, hanging over Finchley Dell like a forgotten sigh. Jessica stood in Daphne Worthington's garden, notebook in hand, observing the wrought iron gate where the mysterious letter had been slipped through just the day before. It was slightly ajar, though Daphne swore she had latched it after the post arrived. Just then, the crunch of gravel made her turn. A young woman with a green scarf stood by the hedgerow, staring at the cottage as though unsure whether to approach or flee. Her large eyes flicked up to meet Jessica's. "Good morning," Jessica called gently. "Can I help you?" The woman hesitated, then stepped forward. I didn't mean to disturb you. I'm Clara Sims, Gregory's niece." "I'm so sorry for your loss," Jessica said kindly, offering her hand. Clara took it briefly, her grip as light as her trembling voice. "Thank you. I found something yesterday. Something odd." Jessica motioned for her to follow, and they sat on a weathered bench beneath the old apple tree. Clara pulled a small envelope from her coat pocket, identical, in paper, style, and ominous handwriting to the one Jessica had received. "I found it on my uncle's desk, hidden in his blotter." She handed it over. Jessica unfolded the note. "Let sleeping secrets lie, the orchard remembers." She read it twice, her brow tightening. "Did your uncle mention receiving any threats?" Clara shook her head. But he'd been different lately. Agitated. He said he was about to reveal something that would change the way people looked at this village. Jessica thought for a moment. "Did he say what it was?" Clara hesitated. "Only that it had something to do with the Worthington estate. But he wouldn't go into detail." That same instant, Daphne appeared with a tray of tea, setting it down beside them. "Jessica, Inspector Langley has sent word. He's ordered a post-mortem, something about the state of Gregory's pupils." Jessica looked at her sharply. "His pupils?" "Yes, apparently they were unusually dilated." That confirmed what Jessica had been quietly considering. Gregory Sims may not have died naturally at all. Later that afternoon, Jessica made her way to the Finchley Dell Historical Society. It occupied an old rectory building just past the green, dusty, and filled with leather-bound tomes and fading portraits. She was greeted by Mr. Bernard Pratchett, the Society's long-time curator, a short man with a penchant for tweed and nervous laughter. "I hear you were one of the last to speak to Mr. Sims," Jessica said, her tone conversational. Bernard adjusted his spectacles. "Indeed, he borrowed some files last week. Records from the early 1800s, land deeds, family trees, even an old court ledger. Said he was chasing down something scandalous. I didn't pry." "Do you recall what families he focused on?" Pratchett nodded. "Primarily the Worthingtons, but also the Bellcrafts. Odd thing that nobody's heard that name in decades." Jessica jotted the names down, then paused. "Did he return all the files?" Bernard blinked. "I assumed so. They're in the archive cabinet." Jessica asked to see them. Inside the drawer, most of the documents were neatly stacked, but a gap stood where several folders should have been. "Curious," she murmured. As dusk approached, Jessica wandered back toward Daphne's cottage. Just beyond the garden gate, she noticed something in the soil, freshly turned earth. She knelt, brushing back the top layer. A square tin box emerged, sealed with a strip of old linen. Inside were several yellowed pages, handwritten in a woman's elegant hand. A diary. She opened the first page. March 13th, 1821. The secret is mine alone now. My sister has sworn me to silence, but I fear what silence may cost. Jessica stood frozen, the orchard wind picking up around her. The timing, the location, the warning in the letter, all of it pointed to this. This must be what Gregory found, and perhaps what someone wanted to stay buried. Behind her, a branch snapped. She turned quickly, but saw no one. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling she was being watched. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Archive. The following morning dawned grey and brooding, the skies heavy with a threat of rain. Jessica Fletcher returned to the Historical Society with the discovered diary carefully tucked in her handbag. Its pages had kept her up half the night, whispering fragments of an old scandal that tied together betrayal, inheritance, and heartbreak. Mr. Pratchett looked up in surprise as she entered. "Miss Fletcher, I wasn't expecting you again so soon." Jessica offered a warm smile. "Mr. Pratchett, I wonder if I could look at the visitor's log from the last week. I'm trying to piece together what Gregory Sims was working on." Pratchett blinked, then nodded. "Of course. We don't normally get many visitors. Let me fetch it." He returned with a small bound ledger. Jessica scanned the list. Gregory's name appeared twice. Then another entry caught her eye. Clara Sims, just 3 days ago. That surprised her. Clara hadn't mentioned having been here. And, further down, Thomas Bellcroft. Jessica tapped the name. "Who is this?" Pratchett paled slightly. "A recluse, really. Lives in the cottage near the old mill. He's the last of the Bellcrofts, descendants of a family that used to rival the Worthingtons in land and fortune. But his branch fell into ruin after some unpleasantness." Jessica's ears perked up. "What kind of unpleasantness?" Bernard hesitated. There were rumours. A child born out of wedlock, a disputed will, even whispers of poison, but the details are murky. Gregory said he found letters in the parish records that hinted at something. He called it the Finchley affair. Jessica noted the term, mentally bookmarking it. Then she handed over the diary. "I found this buried in Daphne Worthington's garden." Pratchett's eyes widened as he read the first few lines. Good heavens. This handwriting matches Lady Eugenia Worthington's. She disappeared in 1823. The family always claimed she eloped, but this speaks of secrets and fear. Jessica nodded gravely. "I believe Gregory found this or something like it, and someone wanted to ensure he never spoke of it again." Later that day, Jessica visited Thomas Bellcroft's cottage. It was a lonely building draped in ivy, its roof sagging and windows dusty. She knocked. No reply. She was turning to leave when the door creaked open. A tall man in his 60s stood there, his clothes worn but clean, his eyes sharp. "I'm not taking visitors," he said curtly. "I'm Jessica Fletcher. I believe your name appeared in the Historical Society's visitor log the same day Gregory Sims died." Bellcroft stared at her for a long moment, then opened the door wider. "I didn't kill him, if that's what you're wondering. Come in." Inside, the cottage was cluttered but not unclean. Books lined the shelves and yellowed papers were scattered across a long oak table. "I went to see Pratchett," Thomas said, pouring a cup of tea. "Gregory told me he'd found something that might clear my family's name. Said it had to do with a switch, someone hiding a birth, faking a signature. He mentioned a lost sister, but he wouldn't tell me more." Jessica took out her notebook. "Did he say who was involved?" Thomas shook his head. "Just that it would bring shame to the Worthington name. He seemed almost gleeful about it." Jessica sipped her tea thoughtfully. And what were you hoping to gain? My grandfather was disinherited, Thomas said. Land, titles, everything passed to the Worthingtons after a legal challenge. I've always believed it was fraud. Gregory thought the same. Before Jessica could respond, there was a knock at the door. It was Inspector Langley. Miss Fletcher, Mr. Bellcraft, I'd like to ask you both to come down to the station. The coroner's report is in. Gregory Sims was poisoned. Belladonna slipped into his brandy. Jessica felt a chill creep down her spine. Langley narrowed his gaze. And I've reason to believe that someone in this village knew exactly what he was going to reveal. That night, Jessica sat in the guest bedroom back at Daphne's, diary on her lap, thoughts spinning like a windmill in a storm. Poison, secrets, a faked identity, and now the suggestion of a long-standing family feud rooted in deceit. A name kept repeating in the diary. Emmeline, referred to as the quiet one, the shadow sister. But no Emmeline Worthington appeared in any public records, not a birth certificate, not a grave. Jessica whispered the name aloud. Emmeline, the one who vanished. A page in the diary rustled open. April 2nd, 1821. Emmeline knows the truth. She said she saw the signature forged, but who will believe her, poor soul? Suddenly, Jessica understood. This wasn't just a scandal, it was a cover-up that had lasted generations. She looked out the window toward the dark orchard, the same one mentioned in both anonymous letters. That was where she needed to go next. Chapter 4. Secrets Among the Trees. The orchard behind Daphne Worthington's cottage had long since grown wild. What were once neat rows of apple and pear trees now wove into a tangled grove where fallen branches creaked underfoot and forgotten roots reached like gnarled fingers through the soil. Jessica Fletcher stepped into its silence just after sunrise, her coat buttoned tight against the morning chill. The diary had mentioned the orchard remembers. And something buried, perhaps both in the literal and emotional sense. If Gregory Sims had found this diary and sought further proof, it stood to reason he may have looked here. Jessica moved slowly, eyes alert. The low mist hung between the trunks, muffling the crunch of leaves beneath her shoes. She recalled the words of Emmeline Worthington, whoever she had been, whispering through time, a forged signature, a hidden truth, a betrayal deep enough to provoke murder centuries later. She paused near an ancient stone bench, half covered in moss. Nearby stood a crumbling statue of an angel, one wing broken, its face weathered blank by rain and time. At its feet, the ground looked disturbed, less mossy, a patch of soil more recently turned. Jessica knelt and brushed aside the debris. Beneath the damp leaves was an iron ring. She pulled, and a wooden trapdoor creaked open, revealing a small chamber, no deeper than a well, its interior lined with bricks. Inside was a metal box, rusted at the hinges. She lifted it out carefully, heart quickening. It bore the initials EW on the lid. Back at the cottage, she prized it open. Letters, dozens of them, some tied in faded ribbon, others loose and brittle. All addressed to dearest Emmeline and signed with all I am, Richard. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Richard Worthington had been married to Lady Eugenia. Could it be? The handwriting matched that in the diary. And one letter, dated May 1821, read, I cannot abide by this lie. To forge a will in your father's name and deny Emmeline her rightful inheritance, it is wicked. Eugenia has become cold, unyielding. I fear what she may do. Jessica let out a slow breath. A forged will, she murmured. Gregory must have discovered this, and someone killed him to protect the lie. Later that morning, Jessica met Inspector Langley at the village police station. He stood at the evidence board, which now included a photo of the poison bottle found hidden in Gregory Sims's dustbin. "Belladonna," he muttered. "Unregistered. No pharmacy in the county admits to stocking it." Jessica held out the metal box. "This may be why Gregory died." Langley skimmed the letters, his jaw tightening. "If this is genuine, it means the entire Worthington estate may be based on a falsified document." Jessica nodded. Emmeline was likely the true heir, but she was silenced, forgotten. Her sister Eugenia staged everything. Gregory must have found references to the will and sought to expose it. Langley looked at her. "And you believe someone in the present still cares enough to kill over it?" Jessica was quiet a moment. "It's more than legacy. It's protection. If these letters went public, it would shatter a long-standing reputation, possibly even impact property rights, inheritances, titles." Langley folded his arms. "And the suspects?" Jessica replied without hesitation. "Daphne Worthington, direct descendant of Eugenia. Clara Sims, Gregory's niece, possibly his confidant or accomplice. And Thomas Bellcraft, who had the most to gain from this truth." That afternoon, Jessica visited the village solicitor, a dry man named Mr. Linley, who agreed to show her the copy of the original Worthington will. She compared it to the diary's description. The signature was wrong. The diary had detailed how Lord Worthington always added a flourish, a long tail on the W, and a loop in the T. This document lacked both. Forgery. Jessica thanked Mr. Linley and left, her mind spinning. She'd solved half the mystery, but now she needed to know who knew the truth today and what they were willing to do to keep it buried. Back at Daphne's, she confronted her hostess directly. "Daphne, did you know about Emmeline Worthington?" Daphne looked startled. "Good heavens, no, I've never even heard the name." Jessica studied her carefully. "Gregory did, and now he's dead. That's not a coincidence." Daphne paled, her teacup rattling in its saucer. "You think someone in my family did this?" Jessica replied quietly. "I think someone wants Finchley Dell's past to stay buried. But I won't let that happen." As night fell again, Jessica returned to her room and found a third anonymous letter on her pillow. "You were warned. The orchard gave you its answer. Walk away before you join Gregory beneath the soil." Jessica stared at it, her heart calm despite the chill in the words. "Not a chance?" she whispered. Chapter 5. The Bellcraft Bargain. The rain finally came the next morning, turning Finchley Dell's quiet lanes into ribbon-like streams that glistened beneath grey skies. Jessica Fletcher walked briskly through the downpour, her umbrella tilted against the wind as she made her way once more to the crumbling Bellcraft cottage. There were too many threads now, and one of them led straight to Thomas. He opened the door before she could knock, as if he'd been expecting her. "I assume this isn't a social call," he said, dryly, stepping aside. Jessica entered, placing her umbrella by the hearth. "Gregory Sims is dead, and now someone's threatening me. You said he promised to clear your family's name, but you didn't mention he'd found proof." Thomas Bellcraft's eyes narrowed. "Proof?" Jessica pulled a letter from her bag, one of Richard Worthington's, addressed to Emmeline. "This was buried in Daphne's orchard. It confirms the will was forged. Gregory knew. That's what cost him his life." Bellcraft read the letter slowly, then sat heavily in a worn armchair. "So, it's true. Emmeline should have inherited it all." "Yes," Jessica said quietly. "And if your grandfather was her son, that makes you, legally, the rightful heir to the Worthington estate." Thomas let out a bitter laugh. "That land is poisoned. Who'd want it now?" Jessica met his gaze. "Someone did. Enough to kill." Jessica spent the rest of the morning retracing Gregory Sims's last days. At the local library, she reviewed his research notes, which had been handed over to Inspector Langley. Among them was a photocopy of a letter from Emmeline to a man called Dr. Henry Carmichael, the former village physician, dated 1822. "My sister's child is not her own," it read. "She took mine to raise as her heir, while I was locked away for melancholia. I write this in case I am never believed." Jessica's pulse quickened. This wasn't merely a story of disinheritance, it was a stolen identity. The Worthington heir had been Emmeline's child, passed off as Eugenia's. Jessica now understood the weight of the cover-up, and Daphne Worthington's ancestors had built their fortune on that deception. Back at the police station, Langley met her with the forensic results. The brandy was laced with a belladonna tincture, difficult to trace without cause, and we found traces of it in Gregory's fireplace ashtray. Jessica frowned. So someone poisoned his drink while he was alone in his study. Langley added, "We also found fingerprints on the glass, Clara Sims." Jessica blinked. "Clara?" According to her, she poured his drink before leaving the house, but she claims he was alive when she left. Jessica's thoughts turned over like leaves in the wind. Clara had visited the Historical Society too, and she'd been evasive. Was she protecting someone, or hiding something herself? Jessica found Clara in the churchyard, kneeling by her uncle's grave, her green scarf whipped about her in the breeze. "Clara," Jessica said gently, "I need to know the truth. Did you give Gregory the brandy?" Clara didn't look up. "Yes, he always had one after dinner. I didn't think anything of it." Jessica crouched beside her. "Your fingerprints were found on the glass, and you visited the Historical Society the same day as your uncle's death." Clara wiped at her eyes. "I found the letter from Emmeline there. I gave it to Uncle Gregory. I thought it would help his book." He was obsessed with the Worthingtons, especially Daphne's side of the family. "Why?" Clara swallowed. "Because of me. I was adopted. Gregory said my real family might be tied to Emmeline Worthington. He believed I was descended from her line. That's why he was so desperate to prove the will had been forged. To restore something for me." Jessica stared. "Are you saying if Emmeline's child was passed off as Eugenia's, then—" Clara looked up. "Then I might be a Worthington, but not one of the liars." Back at Daphne's, Jessica arrived to find the drawing room filled with uneasy tension. Inspector Langley stood near the fireplace, arms folded. Daphne stood with her back to him, face pale. Langley turned. "Miss Fletcher, you were right. We've arrested Thomas Bellcroft. His fingerprints were found on the inside of Gregory's back door." Jessica's eyes widened. "He said he hadn't been in the house that day." "He lied," Langley said. "And he had motive, restoring his family's honor, reclaiming the estate. He knew Gregory was about to go public." Jessica's mind reeled. Thomas had seemed bitter, yes, but calculating. Murderous? Still, something didn't sit right. That evening, Jessica sat again with the diary, her finger tracing the name Emmeline. There was a line she'd missed before. "My sister said the child must never know." What if Emmeline's child had grown up thinking she was someone else entirely? Jessica looked toward the stairs where Daphne had just retired for the night. Chapter 6. The Quiet Confession. It was just past midnight when Jessica Fletcher knocked softly on Daphne Worthington's door. The house had settled into stillness, but Jessica had not. Too many questions circled like restless birds in her mind, and the diary's final entry echoed in her ears. She said the child must never know. Daphne opened the door, her robe tied tight, silver hair unbrushed. "Jessica, what is it?" "I need to speak with you," Jessica said gently. "About your family." "And Gregory Sims." Daphne stepped aside, motioning her into the sitting room. The fire had burned low. Shadows danced across the portraits of long-dead Worthingtons. Daphne poured them each a glass of sherry and sat. Jessica began carefully. Gregory believed that the Worthington inheritance was based on a forged will, that Emmeline Worthington was the rightful heir. Daphne's fingers tightened around her glass. "I found letters in the orchard written by Richard Worthington. He confessed that Emmeline's son was taken and raised as Eugenia's." A switch. Daphne's voice was a hoarse whisper. "I've heard whispers of it. Family legends, nothing more." "But they're not legends," Jessica said softly. "They're real. And they lead to you." Daphne's eyes snapped up. "To me?" Jessica leaned forward. "Who were your parents, really? Do you remember them well?" Daphne blinked. "I was raised by my aunt after my mother died. I was very young, barely 4. They told me she was ill." Jessica gave her a moment, then added, "You were born in 1946. Gregory Sims believed Emmeline's bloodline had continued, quietly, through a hidden child. He thought Clara might be that descendant, but he was wrong." Daphne whispered, "You think it's me?" "I think it's always been you," Jessica said. "Gregory must have found proof. That's why he was killed. But not by Thomas Bellcraft. He had motive, yes, but he didn't have access." "You did." Daphne's hand trembled. "I didn't kill Gregory, but he came to me. He showed me the diary, said he was going to expose the whole story, rewrite the family's legacy. I asked him to wait. I needed time to think." "Then what happened?" Daphne's eyes filled. "He insisted on publishing. I begged him to wait until we were certain. He said there was no time, that he feared someone would stop him." Jessica spoke gently. "And someone did." "Who?" Daphne didn't answer. She reached into a drawer and removed a small envelope, the same cream paper as the previous anonymous letters. She handed it to Jessica. Jessica read aloud, "Protect what was given to you. Let the past rot with the orchard. Gregory has made his choice. Make yours." "No signature," Daphne murmured. "But I know who sent it. It wasn't Clara, and it wasn't Thomas." "Then who?" Daphne looked up at Jessica, her voice barely audible. "My cousin, Leonard Worthington. He's been living abroad for years, but he visits quietly and often. He never lets himself be noticed. Gregory told me Leonard had paid him to stay quiet once before, threatened him. I thought he was bluffing, but now, I don't know." Jessica's eyes darkened. "If Leonard is protecting the family's name at all costs, then he's our missing piece." The next morning, Jessica returned to the police station. Inspector Langley was reviewing Thomas Bellcraft's statement. He looked up wearily. "You've got that expression again, Fletcher?" Jessica handed him the anonymous letter. "Thomas is innocent. The real killer is Leonard Worthington. I believe Gregory was blackmailed before, then finally silenced when he threatened to publish the truth." Langley scowled. "He's not even on our suspect list." "He should be. He had the motive, protecting the Worthington estate. The means, he's used threats before. And the opportunity, he came to Finchley Dell the week Gregory died. Quietly. The postmistress saw him collect a parcel under another name. He's not invisible." Langley looked thoughtful. "We'll look into it," Jessica added, "and if I'm right, he'll try to silence Daphne next." Back at the cottage, Daphne was in the garden when Leonard appeared. Jessica watched from the sitting room window. He was tall, trim, and well-dressed in a navy coat. He approached Daphne calmly, but there was a hardness in his posture. Jessica stepped out the front door and crossed the path swiftly. "Mr. Worthington," she called, "I don't believe we've met." Leonard turned, a smile too sharp to be warm. "Miss Fletcher, I presume? The American detective?" "Writer," Jessica corrected. "But I have a knack for details. For instance, how you've been using aliases to move around the country, and how you threatened Gregory Sims." Leonard's smile vanished. "He was a fool, stirring old ashes. I told him the truth would hurt people. He wouldn't listen." Daphne's voice trembled. "Leonard, did you—" "I warned him," Leonard said coldly. "And when he ignored that, I did what I had to. For the family, for you." Jessica stepped between them. "It's over. The police are on their way." Leonard glanced past her, as if weighing his options. Then he ran. But Langley was already there. 2 officers tackled Leonard before he reached the orchard path. Jessica turned to Daphne, who stood shaking, eyes brimming with tears. "It was never your legacy to hide," Jessica said gently. "It was your truth to honor." Chapter 7. The Orchard's Reckoning. The storm had passed, but Finchley Dell was still. That uncanny stillness that follows upheaval, as though the village itself was holding its breath. Jessica Fletcher stood once more at the edge of the orchard, the morning sun breaking gently through the trees, dappling the moss and scattered leaves with light. Leonard Worthington had been taken into custody the night before. The confession, though reluctant, had come eventually. Under pressure, he had admitted to poisoning Gregory Sims. Jessica had listened in silence as he explained how the historian's threat to reveal the Worthington family's falsified legacy would undo generations of honor. Leonard had viewed himself as protector, guardian of a name built on deception. "Truth doesn't destroy legacies," Jessica had said quietly. "Only lies do that." Now she turned her attention back to the orchard. The village council had requested her help with a final task, cataloguing the historical evidence found in the chamber beneath the statue. With Inspector Langley's blessing, the letters and diary had been sealed as part of an official inquiry. But a second cache had been discovered, one hidden in a small wooden crate buried deeper in the roots of a pear tree. Jessica had come alone to retrieve it. As she prized the box open, her hands shook slightly. Inside were more letters, even older than the last. One in particular stood out, written on crumbling vellum in a hand almost too fine to read. It was from Emmeline Worthington. "They say I am mad, that I imagine shadows where none exist. But I know the truth. My child was taken from me, raised to call another mother, and I, cast aside, was made ghost and rumor. Let this be my witness, that time may one day right what was wronged." Jessica closed the lid slowly. The orchard, once a place of silence, now seemed to hum with voices long buried. Later that day, a special gathering was held at Finchley Dell's parish hall. Daphne Worthington had insisted on speaking. The entire village turned out, curious, some skeptical, others supportive. Jessica sat in the second row beside Clara Sims and Thomas Bellcraft, who now stood as unlikely allies, connected by threads of the past neither had expected to inherit. Daphne stepped to the front, her notes shaking slightly in her hands. She began, "I stand before you not just as a Worthington, but as a descendant of Emmeline, long denied her truth, her voice, her place. This village, our village, was built on stories, some noble, others shrouded in shame. Today we choose to tell them all." There was a ripple of murmurs across the hall. Jessica caught the eye of Inspector Langley, who gave a slight nod of respect. He'd been skeptical of Jessica at first, as so many were, but now he understood. She didn't chase murder for its thrill. She sought justice in its quietest, most human form. Daphne continued, voice steady now. "The letters recovered in the orchard will be donated to the Historical Society. The land Emmeline should have inherited will be placed into trust to support education, community gardens and preservation. Let Finchley Dell remember its truth, not with shame, but with honesty. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous, but it was sincere. That evening, Jessica returned to the cottage to find a letter waiting on her bed. This one was not anonymous. Dear Jessica, you brought light into shadows we dared not enter. You reminded us that justice delayed is not justice denied. Thank you. Daphne. Jessica smiled softly, tucking the letter into her suitcase. Outside, the orchard swayed gently in the dusk breeze. Before bed, she walked out once more to the statue of the angel. She placed a single white rose at its base. For Emmeline, she whispered. Chapter 8. The Final Deduction. The morning of her departure arrived with a golden hush. Finchley Dell looked peaceful now, with sunlight spilling across the rooftops and birdsong fluttering through the hedgerows. The village that had once bristled with secrets now stirred with something gentler. Relief, perhaps, or closure. Jessica Fletcher stood at Daphne Worthington's gate, her suitcase packed and her notebook tucked beneath her arm. She would be leaving on the mid-morning train, bound for London, and then back to Cabot Cove. But before she went, there was one last conversation to be had. Daphne joined her on the gravel path, carrying a wicker basket of scones wrapped in a linen cloth. For your journey, she said softly. Jessica smiled. Thank you, but you didn't have to. I wanted to, Daphne interrupted. You gave me back something I didn't even realize I'd lost. My history. A fractured one, yes, but it's mine now. Honestly mine. Jessica nodded, glancing toward the orchard. Have you told the trustees yet? Daphne's expression grew wistful. Yes, the trust is official as of this morning. The orchard will be preserved, and the community archive expanded. It feels right. Jessica hesitated, then added, Have you thought any more about Emmeline's child? About what it might mean for your own identity? Daphne smiled faintly. I've thought of little else. But the truth is, Jessica, I'm still me. Whether I'm descended from Emmeline or Eugenia, or a mix of both, I've lived a life built on values I chose myself. That's what matters. Jessica's gaze softened. That's very wise. And what about you? Daphne asked. Back to Cabot Cove? Or are there more mysteries waiting in your notebook? Jessica laughed lightly. Oh, there are always mysteries. But for now, I think I'll stick to writing about them rather than solving them. They embraced, and Jessica turned toward the village station. The walk took her past the churchyard, the historical society, and the tidy rows of shops where the villagers now greeted her with warm nods rather than wary glances. At the platform she found Inspector Langley waiting. I thought I might catch you, he said, tipping his hat. Jessica raised an eyebrow. Come to interrogate me one last time, Inspector? Langley chuckled. Number. Just to say thank you. You saw through everything when I was still chasing footprints and fingerprints. I suppose there's something to be said for observation over evidence. It's not magic, Jessica replied. It's just listening closely, especially when people aren't speaking. He looked at her thoughtfully. Do you ever get tired of being right? Jessica smiled. Only when it means someone's died. As the train pulled into the station, Jessica boarded and took a window seat. As it rolled away, she gazed back at Finchley Dell, its steeple, its orchard, its stone paths now bathed in morning light. She opened her notebook, turning to the final page of scribbles. The last line she'd written read, It wasn't just a mystery of inheritance. It was a story of identity, and the price of pretending to be something you're not. She kept her pen, folded her hands, and watched the countryside blur into motion. Some mysteries were solved with fingerprints and arrests. Others, like Emmeline Worthington's, could only be solved by remembering. And in Finchley Dell, memory had finally spoken.